Hey there, I'm Sister Abigail, and I would like to welcome you to my Bible study on the Epistle of Jude. Just recently I wrote a book called The Letter of Jude for Today, a progressive look at the text. And it's available for purchase, $2.99 on Kindle. I try to keep my books and resources as cheap as possible, so that as many people as possible can have access to the information. So we're going to study the letter of Jude. And many years ago when I first started in the ministry, one of the things that I learned was so important, or at least I thought it was at the time, was going verse by verse through the scriptures, and so that's how I was trained to teach, and that's how I taught for many years. And now I'm looking at my faith differently. I see a lot of things differently. Honestly, now I have a lot more questions than answers, and so I'm still kind of teaching verse by verse, but I also like to kind of teach thematically, so there's no one correct way to teach or to preach, and I just want to talk and teach, about the scriptures with you, and I am going to use that verse by verse format because in Nehemiah 8 we read that the scriptures were read and that there was an understanding given to the text, for the hearers. And so I'm going to try to present the Epistle of Jude, the letter of Jude, in this way, in this kind of expositional manner. Hopefully, though, it'll be more applicational, more relative to today, and that's why the book is called The Letter of Jude for Today, a progressive look at the text. Now, it is going to be a progressive look at the text, what would you expect from a transgender evangelist? It's certainly going to be progressive, all right? So I'm not going to cover all of the letter of Jude today. I'm only going to cover the first two verses, and then there'll be more videos to discuss more topics in the future. Now, I can't see very well, and so if I'm not looking at you, or this video's cut my head off or something like that, just kind of give me a break, give me some grace, and we'll and I'll just keep going. Now, the letter of Jude starts, at least in the KJV, it says Jude, a servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. And then he says that he's writing to those that are called by God the Father, sanctified, and kept by Jesus Christ. And then it says in verse 2, mercy, peace, and love be added unto you. Now, Jude, if Jude, let's say, is the author of this book, then it's Jude, the brother of James, the brother of Jesus. James and Jude were from, were children of Mary. However, if you believe in the Trinity, then you say that James and Jude were half-brothers of Jesus, same mother, different fathers. James' father was Joseph, his mother was Mary. Jesus' father was God, and his mother was Mary. It just depends on how you see the Trinity, and whether or not you see the virgin birth in the scriptures or not. And honestly, those are all questions that I still have. Those are all things that that we need to keep questioning and and talking about and keeping our minds open to. So Jude, interestingly here, though, says that he's the brother of James. He could have said, hey, look, I'm the brother of Jesus, And so, by way of application, I think it's important to understand that Jude didn't say, look, I'm the brother of Jesus, I'm the brother of God, and therefore my letter's really important, He was very humble, he had a spirit of humility, he didn't say I'm the brother of God, to give credibility to his writing. Instead, he says, I'm a servant of Jesus and yet a brother of James. Now, to be a servant is pretty interesting in Scripture. There's a lot of different kinds of servants in the Bible. There's the paid servant. There's also the bond servant or the bond slave that we read about in the Old Testament in the Hebrew Scriptures. And this was a servant that was allowed to go free, but yet chose to stay with their master. And so ultimately the master takes them to the doorpost and pierces their ear with an awl, and and then that's the symbol that they've become a servant for life. That'll be interesting to talk about. Body piercing in the Bible. Well, there's one of them. That was an ear piercing. I've got ear piercings. You see, I've got all kinds of piercings. But what's the Christian perspective on ear piercings? I don't know. Let's look at the text. So these were servants that chose to be servants. They said, look, my freedom in the world doesn't hold a candle to my living with my master forever, my service to my master. And so Jude is kind of playing off of that concept. He's saying, look, I'm a doulos, of Jesus. I'm a bond servant, I'm a bond slave of Jesus Christ. Now, this is ultimately a title that many New Testament authors have, that they claim for themselves, and I think it's something that we should kind of strive for as believers. To say, hey, look, my freedom in the world couldn't possibly hold a candle to my service to Christ. And so being a bond slave of Jesus, I think, has some very interesting implications. So he's the brother of James. Paul met with James, the Lord's brother, early on in his ministry when he went to Jerusalem. It says in Galatians that he didn't go to any of the other apostles except for James, the Lord's brother. Okay, now, so he's writing this book to those that he says are sanctified by God the Father. I think this is really important, that we're sanctified by God the Father. Okay? That means we're not sanctified by ourselves. We're not sanctified by our works, by our efforts, by our religiosity. We're not sanctified by knowing all the right things, and we're not sanctified by believing all the right things. It says we're sanctified by God, our loving Father. Okay? So this is grace. And that leads to the concept of, who is outside of the grace of God? I don't think anything or anybody is outside of God. God has a plan for each of us. He's got a calling for each of us. And I think part of that is acknowledging the fact that God's grace has always been there, that God's grace always will be there, and that ultimately, in the end, God's grace and love will always win out. So that works-based religiosity that people have, really has got to go. And so it says that we were sanctified, that we were set apart by God for His specific purposes. There were certain elements in the Old Testament temple that could only be used for certain things, and so you wouldn't walk into the temple and use some of the like the cup that was on the altar to drink your soda. It was set apart for a specific purpose, and I think that as Christians, that's an interesting thing to understand, because we have been set apart by God for a purpose, and I think that a lot of our lives are we're trying to figure out what that purpose is. Hopefully on the Sister Abigail show, I'll be able to show you and help you to to reach your potential, to figure out your plans and purposes, and to attain your dreams, and to fulfill your godly desires and things like that. Now it says that we're set apart by God the Father, that we are preserved in Jesus Christ. Now I love this, because many years ago, when I was really caught up in works-based spirituality, it was like, well, yeah, sure, I'm saved, by grace, but I've got to keep myself saved, by my works, and so it was always a work-based, do, and that would mean that there actually were times that I didn't do what I should have done, or at least thought I should have done, and so I ended up, living in, constant bombardment of grief and guilt, and so constantly feeling like I've let God down, constantly feeling like I've just haven't added up, And one thing to remember here is it says that we are preserved in Jesus Christ, and so Christ is keeping us for Himself, and so that's under His power, that's by His grace, that's the completed work of Christ on the cross. Now, have you figured out what the cross means? Do you know why Jesus had to die? These are all things we should discuss. Some things that I actually go over, in my book. But hopefully, this study will just help us to ask more questions, and continue our search and our walk, in the Lord. Now, interestingly enough, is we can be comfortable in our faith. We've been preserved and kept by Jesus Christ. So if we have been set apart by God the Father, and now we're kept by Jesus Christ, is there any way that we can escape that? If we're not saved by works, can we lose our salvation by a work? All right, and then in verse 2 it says, mercy, peace, and love be multiplied unto you. Now I love Jude's mathematics here. He's saying, look, I don't want these things simply to be added to you, but I want these things to be multiplied in you. I really love that. Mercy, peace, and love be multiplied in you. Those, I believe, should be three characteristics of a believer. May mercy, peace, and love multiply in you. And so that's what I'm going to pray for us for today. I pray that that you're able to figure out how to have mercy, peace and love. I pray that we can both figure that out. What does it mean to be a person of mercy? What does it mean to be a person of peace? What does it mean to be a person who walks in love? Well, if you have any answers to any of those questions, please post them below. If you have any questions of your own pertaining to the first two verses, please post them below. I'll try to get answers to you as soon as I can. Well, God bless you, and thank you for following the letter of Jude for today. I'm Sister Abigail saying God bless you